Hi everyone, and welcome to the next section on your summer independent learning work for psychology. This information is going to be about another famous key study in psychology by a psychologist called Asch, Solomon Asch, in the 1950s. And he did a lot of research on a concept called conformity. Okay, so we're going to think about, first of all, what comes to mind when you think about the word conformity. So you have probably heard of that word before. We talk about conforming. Let's have a look at some images and explore that in a little bit more detail. Have a look at these images. What do you think conformity is? Okay, so what do you notice about those images? Well, one of the first things that you probably notice is that people in each of those images are in a group situation and they all seem to be behaving quite similarly. So we have an image here of a group all smoking, here wearing same clothes, here behaving in the same way in a classroom setting, here all displaying perhaps what you would call antisocial behaviour. In this example here, we've got people behaving in a similar way of queuing, for example. So what do you think conformity means based on those examples? Well, you probably considered conformity is about acting in a similar way to other people in a group situation. And that similar way might be actual behaviour, doing something that is the same as another group, or that could encompass actually saying or believing things which are similar to other people in a group. So we would define conformity as a change in your belief or behaviour or attitude to fit in with a group. And that might be because you want to be like them, there's certain group norms or expectations, or there might be real or perceived pressure. So in the example here, looking at the image to do with a group of smokers, conformity would be either going along with that group and smoking because you want to be like them, but you might not necessarily think that smoking is a good example, or conformity could actually be going along with the group because you enjoy smoking and you think it's a good idea. I mean, that's unlikely, but it is still possible in conformity. So what we're going to look at now is we're going to look at a couple of clips explaining conformity. And I'd like you to write a paragraph why you think the individuals are conforming in these examples, basing it on the definition and what we've just spoken about here. So if you just grab a pen and paper and just jot down your first task to write a paragraph explaining why you think individuals conform in these examples for these two clips that I'm going to show you. So just pause the video now and get that question written down. Okay, so let's have a look. Okay, so we'll just pause that video there and we'll look at the second clip now. Okay, so if we just look at those questions again, not questions, sorry, the question that I asked you regarding writing a paragraph, thinking about our definition, you should be able to now jot down your ideas about why you think people conformed in those examples. So you can consider issues to do with how it makes us feel to stand out and be different and how it makes us feel to go along with the group, particularly in situations that are novel situations that we're not very clear about, we've not experienced before, maybe we don't know what to do. So if you think about everything that was mentioned in those clips, and you can jot down for me now why you think people conform. Okay, so his next task then is to read through details of a very famous study in psychology that has been conducted on conformity in this area that we've been talking about. And this was conducted by a psychologist called Asch in the 1950s, so it is a very old study. The clip that I showed you with people judging the line length is actually a version of this classic experiment in psychology. So I've put details of the study on the screen for you, and you're going to pause the video and have a good thorough read through the description of that study. And then I'm going to present some questions that you're going to answer based on this study. So pause the video for me now and have a read through that study. Okay, so you'll need to grab a pen and paper for me now, and you're going to write down those 6 questions and have a go at answering them based on the study that you've just read through. So you need to think about what task the participants were asked to do in the experiment. What were they actually asked to answer questions about? What were the participants told the experiment was about? Were they told the truth or were they told something else? What did the Confederates do and say in the experiment? So the Confederates are not participants, they are people that are in on the experiment. What conclusions do you think can be made from the experiment? What does it tell us about the reasons for conformity? So to answer that question, you're going to have to think about what the results showed. How many people went along and gave an incorrect answer to that line length judgment? Okay, for question 5, do you think the task would be a good example of how people conform in everyday life? So in psychology, the extent to which a task represents what we do in everyday life and the setting of it is called ecological validity. So if you think about examples of when you might have conformed, do you think that the task of judging lines would be a good example of everyday conformity? And then for question 6, I'd like you to imagine that you had been a participant in either Asch's original study or in the clip that I showed you earlier about in the waiting room. Would you have been at all suspicious about what was going on? Would you think it was a setup? Would you have had any idea that it was going to be an experiment? Did anything make it realistic, or do you think it came across as quite fake? Now, in psychology, when we do an experiment and if people try to work out what's going on, we call that demand characteristics. Do you think they were likely to be a problem in Asch's study? Okay, so you can have a go at answering those questions for me now. And that is the end of the section on Asch's study and conformity. So thank you very much for listening.